Greetings, and of course, welcome to the webinar presented by RSH. Today, we are talking about safeguarding and also protection from SEAH and also encourage governance and proper leadership. This session is about the important strategies for safeguarding to prevent SEAH inside organizations. Of course, the kind audience will also understand about leadership governance in preparing a proper frame against SEAH inside organizations. Of course, this webinar is going to concentrate on the best practices and also provide you with knowledge that can be effective to enhance and empower a dignity environment or proper dialogue in discussions. The leaders will share also the best practices for also questioning and also how governance can respond anything related to SEAH. Also, this webinar is a platform for the professionals to facilitate also the work of SEAH in order for their organization to be a great and ethical example in workplace. And also in order, that's why we invited 3 speakers today in our webinar. Of course, you have Hajar Al-Sayed, safeguarding expert, and we have 3 speakers, and we have the main speaker today, Mr. Hassan Junaidi, who is the country director for Turkey and refugee hosting countries at Takaful al-Sham charity organization. In addition, he is like a qualified trainer and accredited trainer for the developing sector. He was chosen an ambassador in BM4 NGOs hubs in Turkey to support and also provide guidance for the practices, trainers, and also organization for trainings and also recommendations. He has more than 10 years of experience in projects and designing the administration of human also deep through projects. He also provided consultations on the OCA in Syria, Yemen, and Iraq institutional evaluation. He also worked as also a consultant for many of the United Nations agencies and NGOs, international NGOs and academical humanitarian organizations like UNDP, of course, the United Nations, of course, like program AUM, and of course the program of OCHA, program of the UN, and also, of course, UNHCR and other organizations. Also, we are very honored to have Mr. Ahmed Shatiyat, founder and manager of Tahfiz. He started through the participation as a volunteer in many of the initiatives in cooperation with the local also organizations, international organizations. He is also established Tahfiz, Association for Internship in Development in Erbil, Jordan. He's a trainer and establishing small SMEs and small projects. And he's a consultant in also life skills. And he is also working on empowerment and sustainability and development and sustainable development in those sectors, and also developing society. The third speaker, Sima Oglu, she's working in humanitarian aid more than 26 years. She implemented many projects in India, Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, and she is now concentrating on working inside Turkey. And also in 2005, she established SEAH. SEAH established Supported to Life. She works in aid and crisis and emergency and participates in programs of safeguarding and also resilience for also displaced people. She has a bachelor in political science and public administration, a lecturer in Istanbul, and because of her great experience and humanitarian work, she is leading the discussions of the role of local organizations and their role. This webinar is provided in English, Arabic, and Turkish. You can change the language through the options that you have, in the also Zoom, and also make sure that you don't close your, for example, original voice in order to hear the interpretation. The interpretation is going to be provided in English. Of course, this webinar includes a content regarding safeguarding that somebody finds sensitive. That's why I would like to tackle your attentions. If you have any questions during the session, you can of course like the control tool down the screen, and you can, for example, ask questions and also vote. We'll try to gather the questions as much as possible in order to answer them at the end of the webinar. Of course, we also have the electronic email provided regarding the information and regarding the, of course, RSH. On the chat, you can like send us any inquiries regarding any question that you have. At the end of the webinar, we will have like a survey regarding, it's going to be on the screen, and you can also answer the survey at the end of the session. And of course, before going to our speakers today, we are going to talk about like some points related to governance, of course, culture and leadership when it comes to also safeguarding. There are some important points that we have to tackle regarding leadership, governance, and also leadership in organization, which is like concluded in some points. All the institutions should support the implementation of safeguarding through also concentrating on 5 key areas for organizational focus. The first one, of course, is policies and procedures. Of course, like safeguarding needs, of course, like a proper leadership and proper governance in order to safeguard from SEAH. And that's why, and that is through the role of the leaders, which plays an important role in also monitoring and making sure we have agreement in the procedures of like in the safeguarding inside the organization and ensuring the best practices. Also, we should have also like delegation and accountability through the leadership. The effective leadership should have delegation and accountability in order to implement also safeguarding, having the final responsibility, and also with proper also monitoring by the leadership. Now moving to the 5 areas that we should concentrate on safeguarding. They are basically the first priority, of course, is policies and procedures. The organization should develop policies and procedures with to be comprehensive and having like proper, like for example, ethical also and key conduct discussion and also like for that represent also in the ethical and code of conduct for all the employees that represented, and also having policies that safeguard from any risks against safeguarding through having proper like also mechanisms, like for example, the identify manage risks also representing also in secrecy also. And the second point, which is like the second important, is identify and managing risks. The leaderships inside the organization like should detect the risks when it comes to safeguarding. They are like holistic procedures in which we can determine that the risks, how can affect safeguarding inside the institution or organizations. And we could have also procedures that can be recorded and establishment through tackling the register of safeguarding, through having the sample and also like taking procedures of mitigating also risk against safeguarding by the leaderships in the organization. The third one is prioritize safeguarding for cultural improvement. The leaders inside the institutions or organizations should encourage the culture of safeguarding and making sure to understand also the board also and encourage the board to understand safeguarding and of course like spread it inside the institution or the organization. Also the leader of the organization or the organization should follow the code of conduct, transparency, cooperation and dialogue in order to tackle any issues regarding safeguarding. Also, we should have also the idea safeguarding should be repeated, of course, in the, of course, like annual and monthly reviews related to administration and board programs. Also, the fourth also is like handling also any reporting safeguarding concerns. Also, all the leaders in the institution or the organization should make sure there are procedures of supporting also for all the representatives that can report for any also reporting and safeguarding. It should be done in secrecy and of course and discreet, and also like we should follow, also we should make sure that the community should participate with proper mechanisms, of course, in safeguarding. Also review safeguarding constantly in order to enhance the proper also practices and organizational and functional practices, also to have also procedures to support the survivors in a secret manner, and also having a mechanism for also allocating any cases regarding safeguarding, also to make sure we have transparency, secrecy through preparing the report and dealing with cases of survivors. So the fifth aspect is encouraging speaking up. All the leaders of the institution or the organization should enhance the culture of reporting and talk with confidence and secrecy. Also, we should encourage also the volunteers and the community to feel comfortable when speaking about safeguarding issues and reporting any risks or fears. Also, there should be surveys related to the volunteers also and the employees to share their opinion without mentioning their name, to protect their privacy and respect their rights in secrecy, and also to make sure to enhance the communication and the safe environment that enables people to speak freely. Now, I can move to our first speaker, Mr. Hassan. He is going to answer about an important question, which is, of course, the ways that an organization can empower a culture of respect and safety that mitigate the SEAH inside the organizations. Also, Mr. Hassan is going to speak about what are the best practices to encourage, of course, transparent dialogue and addressing concerns inside an institution, and culture safety that respect and diminishes the risks of SEAH. Bless you. Good morning, everyone, in all languages. Good morning, good night in Turkish, and also like in Arabic, sabah al-khair. And today I'm going to be here to answer about both questions that Ms. Hajar presented. That's why the answer is prioritized about the governance and institutional governments in safeguarding. Also, there is a sentence that, of course, sometimes like culture devours like strategy in lunch. Why do we mention this? That, of course, like the organizational culture and governance is the important thing to be effective, to practice safeguarding in any organization. And of course, sometimes we notice that in some institutions that unfortunately many of organization concentrate on like procedures, and unfortunately the results are not proper. So how today we ensure to have an real institutional culture and governance that enhances like safeguarding and also encourages speaking up about like sensitive points? How can we find an environment for proper dialogue and fruitful dialogue instead of just having like phenomena that, and of course like bad phenomena that we find clues? Of course, like enhancing cultural institution relating to safeguarding, we want to start for the minimum that any individual and each individual should understand and also be comprehensive, of course, and to know about safeguarding. Once we make sure that they have the least of the minimum knowledge of safeguarding for the individual, then there should be a written policy about safeguarding. And why we reiterate about a written policy? Because in most of the institutions or the organizations that we work through RSH, whether in Syria, Yemen, or Iraq, we find that there are some practices. But is there something documented? You don't find anything documented, unfortunately, esteemed ladies and gentlemen. So the unwritten thing is not there. This is the rule, even if the practice is there. So the first element, of course, is the importance to have a policy for safeguarding, taking into consideration that it is not enough to create a proper and safe atmosphere within the organization. The second point is after finding the policy and creating a policy of safeguarding, one of the important factors and one of the factors that is very important that I'm doing and also scrutinizing it is also upgrading. I should upgrade always because we are facing different challenges in different contexts. So upgrading is very important. Those challenges should have reflection on the policies, of course, and the procedures, and to make sure that all our staff, after understanding the empowerment, of course, and enhancing safeguarding, that their practices changed after taking their training or TOT. And one of the points that are very important, the next slide, if you can, Mrs. Hajar, is how we can ensure that the practices or our practices today in safeguarding to have a reflection and direct reflection and also reflection in the cycle life of the project. We are not talking about this as one of the demands or the conditions of the donors or the supporter. Of course, we use the top-down approach. No, it's not about the top-down approach. Today we are doing this because once I create an institutional culture safe for safeguarding within the organization or institutions, I empower also the power, of course, my staff, and it's very positive, not also from the beneficiaries and the donors, but also for the credibility of the institution. One of the best practices of the institutional practices that we recommend, it's very important once we talk about, for example, policies or procedures for, of course, any complaints, we should make sure that the complaint team, there should be a person who's a decision maker. It can be a member of the board or one of the also main establishers of the organizations, because for example, once we face any change or risks, we can overcome it because of the power or the authority of the decision maker. Of course, having constant dialogues and discussions is very important within the same structures and organization is very important. But the most important thing that guarantees that the person who also deals with the complaint to have an environment, a proper environment for the one who complains to be saved and protected once he done the complaint during the mechanisms for both parties. And once we talk about, for example, safe, of course, employment, it's not only about volunteers or employees, but the important also to include the head of the pyramid, also, and not only the employees or the volunteers. So the power is in the head of the pyramid, and also preparing codes of conduct, and unfortunately the breach of code of conduct and breaking the code of conduct happened in that place. If it's possible, the next slide. Of course, if you want to talk about how can I know how I have, for example, some phenomena, for example, some, of course, bad phenomena in our culture. So, for example, I can have complaints regarding safeguarding, or for example, misconduct. Part of the thing that we have problems. We have a problem called, for example, silent resignment. It's the bad practices or the administration not dealing with the complaints within a proper framework or or timetable. This enhances, unfortunately, positive behaviors, and then it can affect the effectiveness and, of course, the reputation of the institution. So that's why once we say that we should also provide an institutional culture and also governance, it's not just for example, to avoid scandals, but of course this is to create a trust and build a trust for the stakeholders that can be the beneficiaries, and also the other part is the donors. Also, we want to reiterate a very important point, that dialogue is very important, ladies and gentlemen, today, but we should also have clear policies, written policies within the institutions that clarify what are the borders or the limits, of course, within the institutions as procedures that can be taken into considerations when there is a breach of safeguarding, and or violation, and also the real standard for like safeguarding. It's not the policies and the importance of the policies or the procedures or the mechanisms of reporting, but the important thing is responding to those like also violations. At the end of the day, I don't want to take more than my time. A very important point, and we noticed this once we did the evaluation of many institutions, and the symptoms and a bad symptom sometime, that they are asked to also sign a code of conduct related to safeguarding the employees in the contract. But you discovered there is no understanding by the employees about the signature of these code of conduct. So one of the procedures that was also recommended from RSH regarding this aspect, to make sure that the new employees are obliged to also like hear a presentation for 20 minutes or attend the presentation to understand safeguarding and why safeguarding is very important. And this had like very good reflections that were be able to measure like for the reputation of the institution or the organization, and also like any incomes coming, for example, from the beneficiaries, and also mitigating and limiting also anything related to SEAH. I'm so sorry if I exceeded the time. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Hassan. Of course, it was very brief and very nice presentations. We would like to thank you for this participations. Now we are going to also go to Mr. Ahmad today. Kindly, Mr. Ahmad, who is going to answer us a very important questions about what are the best leadership also practices, and also to prevent from SEAH, and also like to enhance also the culture of questioning, and also to prevent SEAH, and how can leaders foster a culture of responsibility and accountability of these behaviors. Thank you very much from Jordan, from Erbil. We are in organizations, of course, for internship, and also we would like to thank RSH for their support, for who supported us with many tools that were developed, of course, and we built upon, of course, about the best practices, and of course, and core competencies essential for preventing SEAH. We are talking about like many components that are very important. Of course, one of the things that we can build on is leadership, and how we can build the conduct also in enhancing and empowering also responsibility and accountability, to foster this culture between the leadership and also the team existing also through. This is a very important direction. And how can we build this accountability, and also build also channels, clear channels of like communication between the local community and the institutions, in order to enhance and empower like also safeguarding. We should think of both parties, and how we can enhance this relationship between them, in order to make this relationship better and have effective also like compatibility. We can talk about many parts to emphasize on the application of accountability and reporting in a clear and respectful manner, like through having channels. We have many tools for assuring the dignity of beneficiaries and working. We started through the journey working on this and building on the experiences of our community, and how we can exchange, like, for example, expertise in all aspects, of course, like the programs of like questioning and accountability should be clear, and respecting the dignity of beneficiaries and the workers, and developing institutions. And we also relate the relationship between the beneficiaries and the workers, and also the administration of the institutions. And we are looking at it from three perspectives, of course. The movement also brings energy, brings achievement, brings accomplishment, brings accountability, and empowering those channels that we are talking about when it comes to also questioning, accountability, and also making sure and encouraging also the employees or the volunteers from the local community to use these tools. The idea is not to have just those tools, but using those tools in a proper manner also to encourage the beneficiaries, of course, and the team to use those tools, of course, of accountability in order to enhance the best environment and atmosphere in safeguarding, in order for us to tackle any, for example, any mistake and error, of course, and preemptive also dealing with the also any error or mistake, and the process to be constant and sustainable. And there should be like also participation and enhance this empowerment and those channel like of accountability. In order to make sure we enhance it, then it should be related, of course, to other like for example the committees, the specialized committees investigation. They reassure, like for example, justice and encouraging people when there is a real problem in complaint mechanisms, or questioning or accountability, because the committees can have like mistakes and they have errors and they're not trained properly. So having proper, like for example, committees is a constant training, because like capacity building is an endless process and a sustainable process, and it's very important for the committees that receive those complaints or reports that despite their like types or categories or the tools that they have, accountability should be there. They should be trained. They should be strong, and also work on capacity building, whether they in the institution or like other institutions that lead the alliances or are part of an alliance. Of course, we had an experience that we are in two alliances. One of them is like led by the Commission in Jordan and Coalition. And of course, there was enhancing, safeguarding, and of course, like accountability. This was one of the directions in the implemented programs. And also like the Plato, of course, like network that works on life skills, coalition, and also empower life skills also. Like it was very important, of course, like exchanging expertise and knowledge and transmitting knowledge enhances the culture and the thought like of capacity building and the tools of like accountability, and how we can, like for example, have a proper and effective team, and also investigation committees and training, for training to be a constant process like and sustainable process. Talking about coalitions, one of the best practices, it's one of the best practices like in responding to safeguarding and enhancing this definition like on a regional international level also. And we talked about like, the experience like of getting into many institutions and how we can get into many organizations and institutions and to empower them on a regional and also like national level, and the also process to be constant. So we are talking about changing expertise. We are talking about like many channels that through them we can have empowerment and enhancement and effectiveness for the idea of accountability and the leadership skills that are related to accountability. And here we can talk also about like opening up in a positive and effective ways with all the cases that are there, whether like in administration, and also any notes, and also creating a better relationship between the employees also and the working team, for the also process to be constant and to be very speedy, and to have constant support and encourage like mechanisms of reporting regarding the cases that are existing, and also mechanism of like accountability. If we can go to the next slide, dear Hajar. And here we want to talk about like a group of practices on the level like of leadership and also like governance, and how we can look, for example, from many directions. We can, like, for example, summarize them, having like training and awareness, of course, like spreading awareness inside the communities and not only the institutions. We talked about like two directions also, civil organizations, of course, and community organizations and the local organizations that benefits from these like institutions. Once we talk about training and awareness, we talk about those two directions and how we can look at capacity buildings in a more competent way, also, and in a sustainable way. It is like something sustainable and a constant process, and also awareness for the local community, because many beneficiaries don't know anything, and don't know anything or don't have the tools also to build on, like to be effective. And the people need like many points or many tools that they need. The other thing is to have clear policies and procedures also, and transparent, of course, like being clear in the mechanism of responding, and also like reporting any cases is very important. Of course, the way that we are dealing with, in order to make sure we transmit the message to our like employees or beneficiaries, is very important. The process should be clear. The process should be like smooth, clear, comfortable, and has like trust. And of course, trust is very related from the angle, of course, from the trained team, or of course the specialized committees that have proper training and sufficient training in this like direction. So also the easy and crystal clear policies that we can build upon on like a smooth manner. The other point that we're talking about is like ethical leadership. It is very important, like in enhancing those channels between their employees and the local community in another directions. And of course, the mechanism like of reporting should be clear and easy, of course, and connecting it to the policies, and also like we make it better, enhance it, and also adapt it with the constant cases that we have, whether like, for example, on a local or a regional level or international level, in order to empower and enhance like the accountability as one of the best practices also. When it comes to accountability, the accountability takes into institutions through a better building inside the institutions, and see what gaps we have that we can change and also build upon and fix them. And also, where did we reach in the idea of dealing with the local community when it comes to safeguarding, how we can affect the people to report, and also to have a space, a great space for the community to also make sure they represent themselves, and having accountability and also like smoothness in the chain of operations to mitigate any sort, like for example, of SEAH or like any other practices. It's a constant process, and it gives the case available. The case is available in that case, and people interested in those cases. So, and they can do any sort of response also, and we can respond in a proper manner to these directions, and also like dealing with those cases, and also notes, and how we can build upon them. And here we can, for example, go back to the policies of the internal policies of the institutions, and also regulatory policies for the institutions, and the response of like responding to the cases, and also categorizing the risks, for example, from high risk, medium, or like low risk, and how we can able to categorize them. And also this process to be a constant process, and also like dealing with this process needs, like for example, seriousness, and also it should be at the communication. The open communication is something that we enhance, and we make sure that it is very related to all directions in creating the atmosphere safe and also effective environment, like when it comes to the workers inside the institutions and the local community, and the local and the institutions, civil institutions, and how we can build this relationship. The thing that I want to add is like, of course, the quality of the relationship. Mr. Ahmad, can we summarize this last part, please? Of course, this is the last intervention, just like respecting your time, about talking about the relations of civil institutions, and of course, like for example, between private and public sector, in like, and all of us, we are responsible for the case of safeguarding and empowering, like safeguarding, and of course, the role of civil society. We are one of the people that we are going to adopt the idea after this great journey of safeguarding, to enhance those directions and empower the relationship between the three parties, and have, like for example, the clear and also healthy atmosphere. And thank you very much for your concern. Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmad, for your like intervention, rich intervention. We are very happy to hear the participations from the local institutions, because it gives us like reality. Thank you very much. And moving to the third like speaker, Mrs. Seema, that is going to answer us about the question related, a very important question: what are the best practices in also establishing governance structures and whistleblower policies that an organization must implement to effectively detect, investigate, and learn from SEAH incidents, learn from it, and also like effectively practice it. Please, Mrs. Seema, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone.
Shukran.
It's good to see you all. It's a big crowd. This means that everyone is well aware of the importance of safeguarding. And I would like to thank my colleagues for their interventions as well. So my name is Sema, and I'm the director of Hayata Destek, Support to Life. We have been established in 2005. So for 18 years, we have been mainly running humanitarian programs, working with disaster-affected communities. And the protection from sexual exploitation and abuse has been an important aspect of our governance structure. And I would like to share today how it became a part of our governance structure at Support to Life. So we have a code of conduct, which is very critical to how we expect our staff members to behave, both within in the workplace, but also in relation to how we implement our humanitarian programs. And this very key document, this code of conduct, was revised shortly afterwards to integrate the prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse, because it is a very important part of how we behave in terms of as we deliver our programs, as we deliver the aid, how we interact with affected community members is an important aspect of our code of conduct. So for us, the PSEA started integrating it into our code of conduct. This is how we made it a part of our conduct, but a part of our culture as well. We have complaint and feedback mechanisms, both for staff members and for community members. So the fact that we had highlighted the importance of the need to protect against sexual exploitation and abuse, we also found ways of how we can make sure that any violation is reflected through our feedback and complaint mechanisms. So this has been an important part of our orientations and our trainings, but we have also included these messages in the aid that we deliver. So whether it's staff members who are interacting with affected community members, explaining to them that what is appropriately expected of aid workers, but also showing them the mechanisms of how they can complain in case of any discomfort or any violation related to proper conduct. So as I said, as a next step, this became a part of our orientations and our trainings, because of course we have very comprehensive orientations related to what our code of conduct is, the humanitarian principles and what we expect of staff. And we reinforced these orientations with an emphasis on the need to protect from sexual exploitation and abuse. And we realized, of course, oftentimes these are very sensitive issues, and these are issues that are very difficult to speak about, especially for affected community members. So we decided to reinforce also our channels of how this can be reported. Already, like I said, we had our mechanisms for staff complaints, for community complaints, but we also looked at reinforcing our complaint mechanism through a whistleblower policy, in which third parties who are not staff, who are not community members, but who might have witnessed these kind of issues, we gave third parties an opportunity then to reach out to us and to report any ethical concerns that they might have seen related to our organization's operations. Once we do get these complaints, we see if they are sensitive complaints or non-sensitive complaints, because the non-sensitive complaints usually goes to our HR, to our human resource department, and it goes through perhaps a discipline committee and a disciplinary action procedure. But when they are sensitive cases, so sexual exploitation and abuse is definitely considered a sensitive case. in addition to fraud and corruption and similar issues. These come to our ethics committee. And our ethics committee is composed of both internal and external members from the organization. And it has now taken a very important place, a central place in our governance structure at Support to Life. And once these sensitive complaints arrive at the ethics committee, then they are investigated. So they go through an investigation process, and we actually have an investigation team within my organization. We have had several trainings, and we have refreshers on in terms of our investigations. And once the investigation is carried out, the outcome, together with the recommendations, are presented to our executive committee. So the executive committee looks at what the complaint has been, what the investigation result has been, and what is recommended by the ethics committee in terms of action. So what action needs to be taken. And it is the decision of the executive committee then to take the appropriate action. Of course, through this mechanism, we have actually been able to learn, look at what kind of complaints are coming through our ethics committee, and how to understand, or how we can learn from what complaints have come, and how we can reduce or minimize the risks that are related to some of the complaints that have been coming. So it also helps investigating the complaints, also helps us understand what risks we have in the organization, what improvements we have to do, what additional measures, preventive measures we have to take. And this, again, is then used to improve our organizational culture, our practices, as well as our internal systems. And of course, at the end, the outcomes are presented to our board. So STL, the Support to Life, has also a governing board. The executive committee reports to the governing board, and we give them updates regarding to any sensitive case that comes through our ethics committee, and it is presented. And of course, the actions taken, the lessons learned, are presented to the governing board. So for us, the board also follows up on how the executive committee has learned from these cases, and how corrective actions can be taken in terms of how the organization is managed. So for us, this whole mechanism, integrating, looking at how we can prevent sexual exploitation and abuse, and how we can integrate this into our governance structure, has been a learning process for us as Support to Life. But we have also become a focal point for supporting other local organizations in helping them set up their governance structures, in helping them set up their complaint mechanisms, their ethics committees, and their investigation teams, so that they will also be able to better protect against sexual exploitation and abuse. Thank you very much.
Would like to thank Mrs. Sama so much for this rich participation. Of course, we have a question for Mrs. Sima, and the question is related, through your experience, how you make sure that the board members also participate in the dialogues, in the discussions regarding safeguarding, that discuss like the cases of safeguarding inside the institution, kindly.
So as you know, safeguarding has become a very important issue in the humanitarian sector. We come across news of violations, and the fact that this is becoming an important topic in humanitarian action, because we know that as we go and enter communities, and as we deliver aid, we are actually there is a power imbalance. We are going in with resources, and affected communities feel less powerful. So really looking at how we can balance this power between organizations that are providing the support and those that are in need of that support is an important issue. And this is, of course, an important topic for our board as well. So they have asked us to position ourselves to create to around safeguarding. We actually have a team that is only focused on safeguarding internally. So because they have also been effective in terms of making this a part of our organizational culture, they are also following up closely anything related to PSEA.
Thank you very much for the answer, my dear Seema. We move to the next question by Mr. Hassan. From Mr. Hassan, through your experience, what are the clues that also take into consideration safeguarding and don't take into consideration safeguarding, and how we can detect that the atmosphere doesn't take into consideration the dignity of the employees and their dignity? Thank you very much, Mrs. Hajar, for this great questions. We have many indicators that provide clues that we can detect, for example, or symptoms within an institutional culture which has symptoms or negative symptoms. One of the things that we mentioned, for example, silent resignations. This definition, silent resignation, based on the statistics, it exceeded a certain, for example, 10%. So this gives me an indicator that is related, for example, to breaking safeguarding rules. Of course, the percentage is 10%, but of course the number, we can say that the number, there is a space for debating this number or data. It might be 15% or 20%. Despite that, it gives you an indicator that there are bad or negative symptoms in this institution, and one of the problems might be safeguarding. The challenge, of course, in this specificity, is that once we have silent, of course, resignations from the institutions, you became like a training center for other employees. So you have an employee who gets experiences, and then he moves to other places. And of course, for example, replacing the employee who got experiences is not about daily routine procedures. Any employee who gets institutions, still he reaches proper inclusions within, for example, the structures, needs at least 6 months. The other indicator that we can talk about, for example, is that in some cases it can be misconduct, or we can see, for example, harm, or for example, neglect when it comes to dealing with some sensitive cases, for example. So that's why we reiterate, and we want to make sure that if you want to create an institutional culture that enhances safeguarding, the best thing is to work on the level of the leaders. It is supposed that the leaders are the inspiring others and inspire people in this topic. So I think that it's very important to work on the volunteers and to work on the employees based on on the level of the officer SMT, but the leaders of the organizations or the institutions or the founders or the institutions, it's something a very important and vital element. Thank you very much, my dear sir, for the kind answer. Our other questions for our speaker, dear speaker Sama, and the question is, how is there, do you report any incidents of safeguarding happening in the organizations to the donors, and how do you keep or save the reputation of the organization?
Yes, we do report them to donors as well. Some donors are particularly interested in understanding what kind of measures and mechanisms we have in place as an organization to prevent sexual exploitation and abuse. So this, of course, also is becoming a part of the due diligence. So if we want to go into partnerships, donors are looking for these mechanisms. But some donors are asking specifically for us to report on these. And of course, they are more interested in looking at how we are reducing the risk and what we are doing to be able to prevent more of such cases from happening. In terms of the reputation, actually, I think donors are more and more appreciative that we are putting in mechanisms in place. Because we know that this exists. Unfortunately, we do have cases of sexual exploitation and abuse. So donors are appreciative that we are trying to prevent and to protect against these cases. So we have never had negative feedback from donors when we have had these cases and when we have shared it with them.
Thank you very much for this great answer. And of course, it's a question that, of course, is in the mind of many people. The other question is for Mr. Hassan. And the question, Mr. Hassan, for you as a leader and a trainer, of course, in both levels, what we lack when it comes for like methods or methodologies in training, and to make sure that this training reflect on the code of conduct of the employees. Thank you, Mr. Hassan. Thank you very much, Mrs. Hajar. With all honesty and frankly speaking, the challenge is through the movement from the transmitting information to transmitting practices. This is not just like only in safeguarding. This is a topic and an issue that we face in all cases that are related to capacity building and also capacity building. And of course, we always say that the minimum for, like, for example, of reaching the minimum of standards of safeguarding that each individual in the institution should have a pre-awareness course related to safeguarding. But of course, as a practical practice, we see, and unfortunately we notice, that the employees who get training about safeguarding or any other topics, they, after the training, they come back to practicing the pre-training practices to the after training practices. How we can fix this error that we notice not only in the trainings of like safeguarding, but most of the safeguardings related to capacity building. Of course, here we concentrate like on the definitions that we call capability building or capacity building or capability building, that like moving from like capacity or capability building to the individuals to transfer it to a building within the institution or values or ethics of the institution. Like how practically can we do that? We can do it that after I do the knowledge building to those like staff, then once he go back to his institution, he should find that there is policies and procedures that support the practices that he learned. So how you can, for example, enhance and empower this practice through always doing like an open discussion or open discussions with the staff about some unusual challenges that are faced, like, for example, in the field. I can do empowerment, and he can notice that every 3 months or 6 months, depending on the context that, for example, I have, like, for example, I make sure to have an upgrade and sustainability of my policies and procedures related to, for example, safeguarding. So it's not one tablet fit to all. No, it is like, no, it's not one tablet for fit to all. Yes, the safeguarding policy is the same, but we should do always customization that also deals and adapts with the context that we deal with. And the last thing, it's very important that I recommended, of course, esteemed and respectable ladies and gentlemen, that we have like in the RSH, of course, to the services are asking the consultant. It is like a coaching service that through it, I can ask the people and ask, like, for example, ask those coaches how can, like, for example, move from the theoretical like policy to the actual practical like policy. And this is, of course, like provided by RSH through the service of Ask an Expert, and thank you very much for your kindly participation. Thank you very much, Mr. Hassan. This was all that we had today. We would like to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and the speakers, of course, and the kind speakers, Mr. Hassan, Mrs. Ahmed, Mrs. Sima, for their enriched participation and the questions. And we would like to thank you for also the great questions about the practical methodologies of safeguarding. Now we are sharing a survey with you, and we're very grateful if you could also support us with this survey. It will help us design our services and enhance our services better. We'd also like to draw your attentions that we are gathering consultations about the best practices and methodologies and the standards related to SEAH in order, for example, following a methodology that is approaches SEAH, where consultations are going till 9th February 20 and 24th of February of 2024. It's going to be very important for the people who work in humanitarian and development sectors. You can find more information regarding those consultations through the link provided, of course, that you can have it in the box of the dash. And of course, we would like to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and we hope that we communicate with you very soon. Of course, this recording of this session will be shared, and of course the presentation very soon, and also also gathering resources related to this topic. And if you have if you want to hear anything related to future sessions, then you can, for example, record in the bulletin related to of our SEAH, and we hope that we communicate with you very soon. Of course, for example, the links are provided in the chat box. And of course, thank you very much for completing the survey also. Thank you very much indeed, and see you soon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed.